Good morning everyone, welcome to this executive member decision session. Bear with us, we are using new technology and we're just checking that everything's working, which it seems to be. I'm joined this morning by Councillor Webb because our first item of business is a shared item across our portfolios, so we'll both be discussing that item. Our first item is declarations of interest. I have no declaration of interest to make, so we move on to the minutes of the decision session held on the 24th of April. I'm very happy to sign those minutes unless anyone has anything they wish to correct on them. So we'll sign those minutes later on. We have no public participation today, so we'll head straight on to our first item of business, which is Welfare Benefits and Financial Inclusion Outturn report. So I think, David, are you going to start or Pauline? Pauline's going to start and then we'll hand over to David. David looking mildly panicked at me handing over to him first. Sorry, Pauline, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Pauline Stutchfield. I'm Director of Housing and Communities, and I'm here with David Walker, Head of Customer and Resident Services, and Susan Wood, our Partnerships Manager within Customer Services as well, to answer any questions. Just to give you an overview, this quite extensive report reflects all of the activity that's been undertaken by not only the Council but our partners across the city involved in delivery of support for residents in relation to welfare benefits, financial inclusion, digital inclusion, housing, and dealing with the impacts of the cost of living crisis. This is within the context of an interim strategy that the Financial Inclusion Steering Group that's referred to in the report's partnership group have been working on and working to, and recent discussions are starting to focus on a citywide 10-year anti-poverty strategy that you'll be hearing more about in future meetings. The recent backdrop to this is that we have had the positive news about the extension of the Household Support Fund for the next 6 months. Also, the recent announcement around the winter fuel payments. So you'll, if you want to ask us more questions about the work that we're doing to ensure that our residents are able to claim what they're entitled to, and using the new technology we've got to help us to do that across the city. The recommendations in the report are regarding to note the report and the work that's gone on, to note the decisions that we've made recently around capping some of the support, which is absolutely necessary to keep within the financial constraints that we've got and to make sure we can maximise distribution to as many people as possible. And also acknowledging that we have the extension to the Household Support Fund and giving us a delegation to agree the detail of that as soon as we get guidance from the government with the Section 151 Office of the Director of Finance, in order for us to move quickly and swiftly to get the support out to people ahead of this winter. Finally, I'd just like to thank all partners and all staff involved in this work. It's a really good reflection of that work. It is extensive, it's 101 paragraphs, but I think that's absolutely necessary to describe the breadth and depth of the support that's been given to residents in the city.
Thanks very much, Pauline. Anything anyone wants to add?
Just a couple of points. I think one is that this is quite an extensive report, but in some ways it's condensed down to try and reflect the amount of amazing amount of work done by both officers across the council and third-party organisations in delivering support to residents. whilst the cost of living, I suppose COVID before was a difficult time for everybody, what it has done is coalesce that support. I think we work more effectively and efficiently with third sector partners across the city and other organisations, and really delving into our community and community support, which is helping our residents and providing access points to residents that weren't there previously. The report highlights obviously the amount of money that we've given out, and whilst things like fuel vouchers seem quite a small part of that, I think it's worth noting that we introduced those around December of 2021. Since then, we've issued over £10,000 and £600,000 worth of vouchers. By March next year, that'll be approaching £750,000. It's not 10,000 individual families, of course. Some of those are repeats, but we also refer all those to food banks as well. So we've actually issued £750,000 worth of food vouchers ourselves and fuel vouchers. That can be extrapolated to a lot more in terms of the amount of food support we're having to put into the city. And I think the only other thing to reflect in the report is that we're not just trying to support residents through giving them money that comes through the central government or from our own YFAS scheme, but we are also very proactively now trying to increase the amount of income that residents get through things like pension credit take-up, attendance allowance and council tax support. So we're trying to do two things. We're trying to support those who need support financially, and we're trying to support those residents to actually take up financial support that's available to them so that they are financially better off. Thank you.
Thanks for that, David. Councillor Weld, have you got any comments or questions?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'm Councillor Webb. I'm Exec Member for Children, People and Education. So, unsurprisingly, I'm going to talk about support for families and children in this paper. And I just want to start by sort of saying thank you to all the officers here, but also the staff who are sort of out there doing the groundwork, so to speak, day to day. Whether that is in communities, whether that is in schools, or everything in between. I think that I'll start by talking about the holiday activity and food programme. You know, I'm on record as saying I'm not a particular fan of the holiday activity and food programme, in the sense that there's a sort of idea that you have to go to an activity in order to get food, really, which, quite frankly, I think we should have a right to food first and foremost. But what I will say is that this council and its officers have worked incredibly hard on this scheme over a few years now, and have done fantastic work. And actually, the work that you're seeing in York is probably better than it is anywhere else, as far as I know. I know it does compare very, very well against other places. So it has been successful in that respect. I suppose that my question, and it's not necessarily one to answer right here, but it's certainly one that we need to think about, is what next? Because the holiday activity and food programme is scheduled to run at Christmas, and that is it. And that has provided quite a lifeline for a number of families, particularly in the summer. A 6-week period of holiday hunger is an awful problem for young people. And actually, it's very obvious to teachers that when you come back in September, there is a very clear, marked difference between those families who have and those families who have not. And part of that is due to holiday hunger. You know, I think my preference would be that actually there is an improved welfare system that actually supports families, that actually, you know, there's greater job opportunities, for example, so that isn't just as the only thing that's needed, rather than a holiday activity and food programme. But we do need to think carefully about what we do this time next year. And I think it's worth thanking all of those charitable organisations who've been involved in delivering that on the ground. They've done great work, and I'd hope that we'd look in the future to sort of look at how we can link possibly food providers with those activity providers to really tighten that up and see if there is something we can do in-house that works well. moving on, I think it's really good to highlight that last Christmas, community team ran a programme of food and household essentials and toys to support families. That was based at the Westfield Children's Centre and a space provided by the Islands charity as well. That's an absolutely fantastic thing that we're doing in our city. Again, it's supporting those who really need it in a very unequal place, like York. And I'll finish with the idea that there are specific things that help and are aimed at helping children specifically, but everything in this report is about housing. It's about supporting families, and actually what that does is then really supports those young people in those houses as well. So I think that there's an awful lot of work that really supports our communities, our families, our children, and it is a shame that all this has to exist, isn't it? That actually that we live in a society where we're almost normalising poverty, but we do step up in the city and we are supporting them absolutely in the right way where we can. So thank you for everything you're doing, and I know it's really making a difference to families. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Webb. Really important points there, and I, share your despair that we live in a society where we have to apply these sticking plasters to try and rescue people from a really unfair, unequal system. I think that I would like to echo the thanks to everyone who's worked. I think especially over the last year when there has been an assumption that everything's okay now, that COVID's gone and everything's fine, and inflation isn't quite as high as it was. But I make the same point every time. Even if inflation is lower than it was, that still means prices are increasing. Until inflation is zero or minus, prices are increasing, and people's income is not increasing at the same rate. And that means more and more people are tipped into that position where they cannot afford the basics. They cannot afford basic food. They cannot afford to heat their homes and to be able to wash in hot water, which I think all of us would recognise as the absolute bare minimum standards for life in our country. And, there is great tribute to be paid for the staff, for the volunteers, for the people working in partner agencies across the city who every day are met with the despair of people who deal with people maintaining their dignity, being compassionate and caring, without being patrician and without making people feel bad for needing help. And that's a real skill, and it's one that we should absolutely value. I also want to pay tribute to the staff who are trying to find ways to continue offering support where it's needed. And I know that having to cap monthly spend has been really tough, because that means that those people who are met with that despair have to say no sometimes. And I acknowledge how uncomfortable that is, but we absolutely will be facing a winter of crisis, and we need to be able to offer something to those most in need through that crisis period. I am relieved that the Household Support Fund is being continued. Giving only 6 months of it this year was always a mistake, and I'm relieved that the new government has made an early indication that it's going to be extended. And we await the final detail of what that scheme will look like and what the parameters will be, but it will help us to help more people over this difficult winter period. I did want to ask a question. Pauline, you mentioned the winter fuel payment changes, and I did want to ask a question about what work's being done to support people around who might be affected by that change. Okay. I don't know if you or David or Susan.
I I'm Susan Wood and I'm the Welfare Benefits Partnership Manager in the Council. And so we've been working, one of the things that we have used some of the Household Support Fund money for from previous schemes is to work with policy and practice to be able to use our data better. And one of the things that has identified is we can use our council tax support data and housing benefit data to identify people within that cohort who we know are missing out on pension credit. The communities team and myself have been working on contacting those people, as well as colleagues in adult social care. So we've identified the whole cohort, and we've split that cohort so that anybody who has already got contact with adult social care is being contacted by our income services teams, and those 150 have all been written to and contacted, and they're supporting those people who already have some contact with adult social care. We have another around 320 households that we've identified that don't have that contact, and we've started to write to those. So 184 letters, I think, have already gone out to those households to say, we think you're could be missing out on pension credit, explaining to them how they can apply for pension credit themselves, and also where they can get support in their ward from ourselves and from partner agencies. That from the wider data that policy and practice have identified, that we think there's somewhere in the range of 1,600 families, households that could be missing out on pension credit. But we only know about those and can identify specifically to write to those people, those ones that we have data on and already have an interaction with the council. So there is around, we think, estimate, it's just an estimation, that there are around another 1,200 households that could be claiming pension credit. And so as part of that programme, we're starting to look at how we, as well as writing to people, is publicising in communities and working with media teams and local community groups to make sure people know that they are checking and that they are making sure that they're accessing that support and checking whether or not they're entitled to pension credit. And we've got the Plan Talk Money campaign in the beginning of November as well, which is a regular rolling programme where we try and go out to people and make sure that they're claiming. So we'll have some events and things going on there as well. And looking at the next Household Support Fund about how we can best use that to make sure we're targeting those groups as well.
In terms of the winter fuel allowance that obviously a lot of pensioners have lost, clearly there's those who are just on the borderline. What we are doing is exactly the same thing we're doing with pension credit, is trying to identify them through the data we're getting through our LIFT system that comes from policy and practice. The problem we have is that we have to use DWP data. It's not always transparent because they won't provide us with the actual names and addresses, so we just may know the numbers. So we're looking at what comes back from that report to give us an indication of how many people in the city may be borderline. Once we have those numbers, we'll then look at what we can do in terms of any support either through HSF 6. I lose track of the numbers we're on. If we can do something through HSF 6, we may allocate some money to do that. We still have some ongoing fuel vouchers as well, so whether we can potentially use the fuel vouchers to put them back in the same position. Generally speaking, we've already discussed that we would provide £200 to every person who qualified, either through the discretionary scheme or any other scheme we may run, so it's consistent. But of course, we've got to predicate that we don't actually know the numbers yet, and when we do, if they're really, really high, it depends on how far we can stretch that money. So we are aware of it, we are conscious of it, and we are trying to take action to address that.
Thank you. It's great to hear such proactive work is going on around that, because I know it is a concern, and it will be a concern to York residents who see themselves in that layer just missing out on pension credit, and it's great to hear the proactive work going on, and that is testament to the dedication of our teams who are forward-thinking, forward-looking, trying to solve the problems that we've got due to poverty in society. Of course, we'd prefer it if everyone had an income that meant that they could keep warm over winter, but we're not in that situation, and it's absolutely right and proper that we direct the funds that we have where they're needed most. So that is much appreciated work. Anything else, Councillor, before we?
No.
No? Okay. So the recommendations, I'm asked to note and comment on the details of the report, and there are many things that I could have commented on because it is a very extensive report, and I would encourage anyone who wants to know about the work that the council is doing to support the most vulnerable to have a look at this report, because it is very it's actually, although it's lengthy, it's very easy to read, and there are really helpful graphs and things that made it make much more sense and brought it to life. I note the capping of the monthly spend from YFAS in order to make sure we've got emergency support to the end of the financial year, and I'm happy to delegate decision making relating to the extension of Household Support Fund to officers in collaboration with the Director of Finance. And my hope is that that will be in line with what we've discussed today and in line with previous Household Support Fund schemes that we've run. So I'm very happy to accept all of those recommendations. And thank you very much, everyone, and thanks for a very comprehensive and detailed report. Okay, at this point we do need to move because the lights just dimmed, didn't they? It's really too still. So please keep moving or the lights will go off. Thank you. So we move on to our next item of business, which is the application for community right to bid under the Localism Act. So we have here 3 properties where the listing of an asset of community value is to be renewed.
Yes.
I'll hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lomas. This report presents 3 applications to renew the asset of community value listing of the Golden Ball Public House at 2 Cromwell Road, the Bluebell Public House at 53 Fossgate, and the Hurst Hall Community Centre Border Road at Strensall Camp. The asset of community value regulations require that properties can only remain listed as assets of community value for a period of 5 years, following which a new application is required. All 3 applications have been checked as correct and valid by the Council's legal services. No objections or comments on the applications have been received from the owners or occupiers of the properties. There are no updates to the contents of the report, and for the reasons set out in the report, it is recommended that the applications to renew the listing of all 3 properties is moving forward.
Thank you very much. And I have again read a thorough report, including the original applications for the renewal of listing of all 3, and I'm very happy to accept the recommendation to approve the renewal of the listing for all 3 on behalf of the community group for the Golden Ball, the regulars of the Bluebell, which I think is a lovely name, and the Parish Council for the Hurst Hall Community Centre. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And there being no urgent business, that brings us to the end of the meeting.